Hello. We should be live. Everything should be okay. And just giving a second to see if it works on the phone. Hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Yeah, looks good. We can start. Hey everyone. So as always, nice to have you here. Welcome. Please feel free to type in your questions or anything you want to share in chat as I go along. I'll keep an eye on the chat and I'll try to answer as soon as I can. So today we're going to talk about how to fix the communication in your team. That is the topic of today's webinar. Let me make myself tiny in a corner of the screen so we can see the important stuff. Okay, here's tiny me. And let's start discussing about today's topic. So, how to understand and fix your team's communication, a systemic approach. What do I mean by a systemic approach? I mean that we're going to think like managers. We're going to think like leaders. We're not going to focus on the details of the communication, like how you say something or how to listen better or how to be emotionally intelligent, or how to do active listening or how to be assertive or things like that. Those things are very important, but we're not going to talk about them today. Today we're going to step up and look at it from the helicopter view and look at our whole team, our whole department, our whole company, and try to see communication as a flow, as a system, and understand how that goes and try to optimize that kind of communication and that part of communication. So today we're thinking like managers, and we're going to follow a couple of principles as we analyze this aspect. First is that obviously team members should never hesitate to communicate when they need to. Whenever your people need to communicate, they need to ask something, they need to say something, you should always encourage them to do it. It's much better to say something than not to say something. That is a fact. However, at the same time, from a management point of view, at a systemic level, we also want to reduce the need for communication. And if these two things seem contradictory, let me give you an example. So, very simple example, an analogy. Let's say we meet, two of us, we agree to meet somewhere in the city and have a lunch together. And I start to come towards that meeting place, and every 5 minutes I call you asking for directions. Right? Should I take left? Should I take right? I reach this place, I don't know how to continue. And I make a little bit more progress and I call you again. And I make a little bit more progress and I call you again. On one hand, it's good that I'm calling you. I'm lost. It's good that I'm communicated, right? So it's a good thing. On the other hand, the question is, why do I need to communicate so frequently? Why am I so lost? Why don't I have a map? Why don't I know what I'm doing? As a manager, this is how you think. You appreciate that your people communicate, but at the same time you ask yourself, why do they need to talk so much? Why do they always have questions? And you try to fix the need for that communication so they don't need to talk so much. So this is how managers approach things. And we remember that every communication is an opportunity for improvement, but also an opportunity for error. Every time two people need to talk, there is an opportunity for misunderstanding. And the fewer opportunities for misunderstanding we have, the fewer problems we're going to have. What are the symptoms of bad communication? When you have bad communication in a team, how does it look like? Well, it looks like the wrong thing is delivered. Your people don't understand the requirements, they deliver an unsatisfactory work result. They deliver it late. Problems are not raised or are raised the last minute. So just 5 minutes before the deadline, they tell you that actually they don't know what they're doing. And you ask them, why didn't they tell you earlier? There's no clear answer. The team gets stuck a lot. Even though they have the abilities and the competencies to solve the problem, somehow they get stuck. And you don't know exactly why they get stuck. but they get stuck. Different people in the team have different understanding of what's going on. So you talk to different team members about the same thing, and everybody has a different opinion about it. Everybody has a different understanding of what that means. The team doesn't learn from their mistakes. This is a clear sign of bad communication in the team, and the team has no memory. So you make decisions, you promise yourselves you're going to do better and you're going to improve, but nothing happens. And this is a clear sign that the team doesn't communicate well among themselves. How to improve communication in the team? Well, there's two main things you can do. One of them is just teach your people to communicate better. The communication skills we talked about in the beginning, just the ability to express themselves clearly, to ask for what they need, to follow up, to clarify, to just the basic communication skills. And this helps. But even more importantly, and with a bigger impact, is to structure the systems and flows of communication in your team to improve the communication. And this is what we're going to talk about today. And let's look at a simulation. We're actually going to look at some numbers, some simulations of how communication works in a team. This is a newsletter post of mine, and I'm going to take some example from here, and we're going to do some live simulations of how communication works in the team. If you want to sub to my newsletter, it's called The Dream Mechanic on Substack. It's free, and I send this kind of stuff regularly then. So I have a little bit of software that simulates how the communication works in the team. And we have the following parameters. We have the team size. How many people do we have in the team? We have the percentage of failure rate per communication. So this simulates the fact every time two people talk about something, they communicate about something, there's a certain likelihood that they will misunderstand each other. This is that percentage. Then we have the percentage of degradation per failure. And this means that when two people misunderstand each other, they don't misunderstand each other totally. They misunderstand each other partially. And this percentage simulates that. So if we have a 20% degradation failure, that means I understand 80% of what you wanted to tell me. We have a number of steps per run, which is the number of times people need to talk to each other to complete a given task on average. So for example, let's take a simple example, to complete a user story in an agile team, if the product owner needs to talk to the developer and the developer needs to talk to another developer who does the code review, and then they need to talk to a tester, then we have 4 communication steps. If they need to go back and forth a number of times, then we have 8 communication steps, or whatever number of communication steps we have. And this parameter, which is called repeat member attenuation, is when the communication comes back to someone who was part of that communication channel previously, that's a good thing because they might remember something about it. And the likelihood of communication failure is decreased. So if the same people kind of talk about the same thing, it's more likely they'll remember what they're talking about, and they'll make fewer communication mistakes. So we're going to play with these parameters and see the huge difference we get in communication quality depending on how these things happen in your team. So I have some examples here. So let's take some good examples and run them live. The results are going to be slightly different because this is always slightly different, but they're going to be around the same place. So let's take a very good scenario, right? A good scenario is a small team with few communication steps. Failure is relatively small, degradation is relatively small. So it's a good scenario, right? So let's model this here. We have 5 people in the team. Failure rate is 30%, degradation was what? 15%. So these are a small number of people who know each other, they talk well to each other, they understand each other well, and their work is not overly complicated. They only have 3 communication steps. So in order to get the average task done, they only need to talk 3 times. Let's just run one scenario. It's not relevant statistically, but just to show you how we model this. So in this case, it's a perfect communication. The 30% chance didn't happen. But if we try again, for example, here, we had a communication failure and the message was degraded by 30%. But then it worked okay. But let's run it 100 times and look at the overall averages. So we ran this scenario 100 times, and if we look at the overall averages, I think I need to move my pretty face here. We see that the average final result is 92% quality, almost 93% quality. So small team of people who communicate well with each other, and the communication chains are small, communication is great. Okay, let's try to make it worse, right? Let's increase the number of steps and change nothing else. Let's just assume that we have the same people, same team size, same people, same communication skills, so the same communication quality in itself, but their work gets more complicated. And now, in order to finish a typical task, it's not enough for them to have 3 communication steps, they need to have 10 communication steps. So it's a lot more communication, a lot more back and forth. And if we look at the overall result now, it has decreased to 84%. Not a significant decrease, but it has decreased. Okay. Let's make it even more difficult. Let's say we have 10 team members. Everything else stayed the same, right? It has decreased even more, right? Let's reduce the attenuation. What does this mean? This means that people kind of forget what we were talking about before. How can people forget what we are talking about? Well, they forget when things take a long time. If you talk about something today and you have to remember it next week, you might forget about it, right? And we run it again, and now the result is even worse. Let's make it even worse, right? Let's make it even worse. Let's take a very bad scenario. Let's say we have, what is the worst scenario I have here? Let's say we have, yeah, this one. Okay, so let's say they're even bad at communication itself. So the failure of rate per communication is 50%, and the degradation is also 50%. And this might seem unrealistic, but it's happening. I've seen this happening. You've seen this happen possibly, especially when you have, all kinds of distributed teams and people speak in different languages, people in different cultures and time zones and things like that. A lot of the communication fails. And if we write it now, of course, this is disastrous. It's just basically every communication fails. We only have a 4.3 rate of success. Let's make it slightly less disastrous. We still have a very bad failure rate. And this is a nightmare scenario, but this is the scenario when you have large teams of people that don't really know each other, don't have good relationship with each other, they're distributed all over the place, they speak different languages, they have different cultures, different time zones, and things like that. Majority of the communication can fail. So if you have a team like this and you want to improve your communication, what do? So first, maybe you teach them to communicate better, right? You say, okay, let's have some communication practices. Let's write better, clearer emails. And maybe this reduces from 50% to 40%. And you run the simulation again. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit better. Okay. Maybe you simplify the workflow and they don't need to talk so many times in order to do so, to finish a task. So let's reduce this from 10 to 8. It's a little bit better, not a lot better, not a lot better, but you simplify it to 6. It's getting significantly better. Maybe you can make the team smaller. If you split the team in 2 and make the team smaller. So let's say you only have 5 people in the team now. It's about the same in this case. And the reason why it's about the same is because attenuation is small, so people don't remember what they talked about. But let's increase the attenuation and it gets significantly better. And this is typically correlated with team size. The smaller the team, the bigger the attenuation is. And you see how you can increase this communication quality by playing with these parameters. And as a manager, this is how you think. You look at your team and you're thinking systemically, what can you do to increase the quality of communication in your team? And this looks a little bit artificial. Let's take some more specific examples. So, real life examples of what makes bad communication. And it's the first and foremost is long processes. So, which is simulated in the simulation here by the number of steps. So in order to complete one task from beginning to end, a lot of people have to talk about a lot of things a lot of times, and it takes a long time because of that. So just to take a basic example from software development, you have a lot of requirements, conversations, and then though they are approved by a different person, and then they have coded, and maybe multiple people, multiple programmers work on the code, and they talk to each other, and then it has to be reviewed, and it has to be tested, and there's a lot of steps and a lot of communication. This increases the likelihood of communication failures. So the more you can simplify your processes and reduce the number of steps, the more you're going to have better communication. It's as simple as that. Because every communication has a likelihood of failing. And you can reduce that likelihood of failing, like here, by teaching your people to communicate better, by having standards and all those kinds of stuff. But there's always a likelihood of failure. So the simpler the process is, the better the communication is going to work. Another thing that affects communicating negatively is multitasking. When people work on different things at the same time, their communication gets much more difficult. Now, imagine a developer that's working on 3 user stories. They're talking not exactly at the same time, but they're talking alternatively to 3 testers and 3 different other people that need to help them, and they have multiple conversations going on. So they have to switch context from one conversation to another. They lose focus. It's more likely they will communicate badly. The time between those communications is always longer, because if you work on 3 things at the same time, overall it's going to take longer. So you ask a question today, you get an answer 2 days from now. You have to remember what that was about. You follow up, you get another answer 2 more days from there. So the communication gets worse and worse and worse. So multitasking is very bad for communication. Skill fragmentation is bad for communication. Hyper-specialization. When we have people that are hyper-specialized, they can only do a very narrow thing. That means that in order to do something, you need many different types of people, many different skills, because this person only does this specific thing, and they need this guy, and they need this person, and they need that person, and you need 3, 4, 5 people to do anything. And that means a lot of communication, and that means inefficiency and a lot of problems. So skill fragmentation it's another problem, and probably the biggest of them all is having a large team. I think a team above 7 or so starts to negatively impact communication significantly, and a team above 10, it's very difficult to have optimal communication. A team above 10, you can if you work really hard, if they're really good people, but it's very, very difficult. So probably one of the easiest things you can do to massively improve your communication is just have smaller teams. Just take the team and split it in 2. It's easy to do. So what do we do with managers to improve communication? Smaller teams, simplified processes and flows. Also improve the communication skills of your people, improve your information systems, reduce multitasking. This can be achieved with WIP limits. Reduce skill fragmentation. So as full stack, quote unquote, as much as your people are, and I'm not just talking about development, as the more people are able to handle different aspects of the same task, the better communication is going to be, and group related things together, which is in terms of responsibilities. So for example, if we have a development team and they need help from a designer, and every time they need help from the designer, they have to go and ask a designer who is in a different team, and they always have to go back and ask, and the answer comes with some delays, and it's a back and forth. That's unnecessary communication. There's possibility for communication failure. So put them together. Put a designer in the team so they can talk to each other more efficiently. Put related things together. And these are the things we do as managers to improve communication in the team. What is the bottom line here? The bottom line here is that whenever we see that people are not communicating, from my experience, I've been a manager for a long time, and I've been doing management consultancy and leadership consultancy for a long time, and I look at how people work and how teams work and how companies work. And I see that a lot of the times when managers see that communication doesn't work, they default to 2 actions, and both of them are insufficient. One of them is telling their people to learn to communicate better, and this is simply about communication skills. Be clearer, ask questions, be more assertive. And this is good, this is fine. And the other instinct is to create process, standards, documentation. The idea being that, okay, people don't communicate well, they misunderstand things, so let's just document things, let's standardize things, let's create processes so there's no more confusion. True to some degree, until those processes lead to even more communication, because they create complexity and they create more steps that need to be followed. And the thing that few managers do, and the thing I'm talking about here, is actually try to understand how your communication flows in your team. So if you are a manager for a team or a department and you think the communication is not working, before taking any measures, you should understand how the communication flows in your team. You do that by talking to your team members, by observing, and just by looking, attending meetings, seeing what people do, asking them how they get the job done, and understanding how communication flows. And some of the communication is going to be formal, so it's going to be according to the process, and some of it is going to be informal. You will find out things like, typically a lot of people need to go and ask John questions, because John is the only one who knows a certain thing that everybody needs. That's not going to be written in any process, but it's an informal communication step. Everybody needs to go and ask John questions. So understand how the communication flows and then simplify it like this. And that's what I have to say for today. I don't think we have any questions in chat from what I see. I'll just wait a minute to see if we have any questions. Now, think about communication systemically, think about the size of your team, understand how frequently communication fails, try to reduce these things, and most importantly, have small teams and simplify your work. Reduce multitasking, teach your people to work on one thing at the same time, and you're going to get a lot of results. I know it's a bit more boring in the sense it's much more sexy to discuss about emotional intelligence and active listening and things like that. And those things are very important, don't get me wrong. But sometimes this stuff has more impact on how we do things. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you so much for your comments and for being here. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Oh, I have one question. What do you advise when we have seniors in the team and they are rather reluctant to sharing anything? So when we have seniors in the team who are reluctant to share anything, in terms of a systemic approach, what does that mean? That means that we'll have higher failure rates and we'll have more runs per communication. In this case, it's clearly, how can I say, a coaching situation, a one-to-one conversation that you have to have with them. You have to understand why they are reluctant to share information. Sometimes seniors are reluctant to share information. Maybe they're not even aware of it. Maybe they're just too busy. Maybe they just don't know how to communicate. Maybe they don't intend to be reluctant in sharing communication. They're just not good at communicating. Sometimes they are reluctant to share communication because they feel like they're overworked and they're overstressed and they don't have time to help everyone else. Sometimes they're reluctant to share communication maybe because they're demotivated for whatever other reason. Maybe they think they're overworked or they're underpaid or they're underappreciated, and this is a way they rebel against that. But the main thing is that you have to understand what is their reason for sharing communication, and then make it clear to them in a polite way that they should share communication, and then discuss exactly how. Sometimes you need to give people a specific way of being useful. So rather than just telling them share more, which is vague, tell them something specific, like, at the planning meeting you should do this, or in whatever situations you should do that. But first and foremost, you have to understand why they are reluctant and get them on board and get them willing to share. And then you help them, sorry for the noise, you teach them how. Just observing does not suffice it, and if asked directly, they become defensive. Yeah, well, this is a typical scenario. I've seen this. The person who's been in the team for a long time, and they're a difficult team member, so to say. But they're essential because they have a lot of experience, they have a lot of knowledge. It's a different topic. It's not about communication. It's about how to motivate these people, how to integrate in the team. But fundamentally, you have to address the issue, right? You have to address the issue. What do I mean by that? I've seen situations like this where there were seniors like the one you're describing in teams for 10 years. And they were complete, excuse my language, assholes. They refused to help. They were always against every initiative. They were very difficult individuals. But they were essential, technically speaking, because they had some knowledge that nobody else had. And there had been multiple team leaders and managers, and nobody dared to actually address the problem because everybody was too afraid. But what if they get upset and quit? Then everything is going to hell. And I understand that concern, but if you don't address the problem, it's never going to change. So what you need to do in this situation, it's a difficult situation because they know what they're doing in the sense that you actually need them because they have a lot of experience. But you should prepare for a confrontation with them. You should try to get other people to learn at least partially what they know, so you have a backup option. This is going to take you some time. And then you should address them politely but directly and put the issue on the table and understand why they're not willing to be part of the team. But be firm, right? You have to not give up. They're used, so these people are used to managers giving up. Many managers in the past went to these people and told them the same thing. And these people have learned that the only thing they need to do is just basically not collaborate, and the manager will get bored at some point. They'll get tired of insisting and nothing is going to change. So if you really want to change the situation, you have to put in some effort, and there is the real chance that they will actually quit the team, and you have to be ready for that. And it will be painful for a while, but overall that will be an improvement for the team. I'm talking about worst case scenarios. I don't know exactly what your scenario is, but worst case scenario, I've seen these people. And when they are so negative, long term it's better without them than with them. But again, I don't know the details of your situation. But even before that, you actually have to be firm and talk to them and make it very clear that this is not the right way of doing it. But sometimes it's simpler, right? Sometimes maybe they just didn't know how, or they didn't know it was required. Okay, let's look through the questions. We have a lot of questions. That's awesome. Somebody says they suspect it's partially because they're introverts. Yeah, that might be the case. That's a good scenario, right? When someone is not a bad person, they're not trying to be difficult, they just don't know. This is awesome. This is going to be solved easily because if you talk to them, they'll understand and they'll want to be helpful, and they just need help. I was referring mostly to the kind of worst case scenario, which does exist, and I've seen them. What do we do when envy arises between colleagues and the responses are no longer diplomatic but tend toward more personal attacks? So when we have this kind of, let's call it toxic relationships between colleagues, that's a big problem, and it affects everything. When you have this kind of relationship in the team, it dramatically negatively affects the performance of the team. I've seen it a million times. You've seen it a million times. It has to be addressed. Again, the conversation of how exactly you address it is very nuanced, but basically you have to address it. So as a manager, what I would do as a general principle, I would talk first individually with, let's say you have two people who have this kind of negative relationship between them. Maybe you have more, then you have to talk more, but I would take them one by one individually, and I would very politely and very friendly and very respectfully bring the issue up. Like, I've observed that when you talk to that particular person and when they talk to you, things get a bit difficult, things, get a bit tensed. What do you think? I would ask them what they think, and they will say whatever. And sometimes maybe you're lucky and the things get solved easily, sometimes not. But I would talk to them individually. I would make it clear that's not okay. We need to fix it. I would ask them if I need to do anything, and see if that works. If that doesn't work, I talk to them again. And if it doesn't work, I talk to them together. And I'll try a number of times across. Usually how I approach these situations is I will try a number of times across 2 or 3 months. But if I see no progress in 2 or 3 months, I don't expect to solve everything, but I want to see some progress. I want to see them trying. If they're unwilling to change anything after 3, 4, 5 attempts, then it becomes a performance issue, but that's a different conversation. But the first thing, you have to address it. You cannot. A common mistake managers do is that they don't address it personally because they want to avoid conflict. So they kind of hint, they say something hoping that those people are going to understand what you mean and fix it by themselves. You look at them hoping that they will see that you looked at them in a certain way. No, don't insinuate, don't hint, don't be subtle. You have to talk to them. You have to address it directly. That's my advice. What do you think about people who like to do multitasking? So multitasking, it's a very difficult thing. So one of the most important things people can do to improve their personal effectiveness, in my opinion, is to reduce multitasking. Multitasking is like a drug. Multitasking is like smoking, it's like drinking. It's addictive because it makes you feel productive, but you're not necessarily productive. Because you're talking to multiple people, you're answering this, you're doing that, you're fixing this, you're doing this thing. It feels like you're in the mood, you're in the flow, you're handling stuff, right? But you end up with, at the end of the day, you've worked for 8 hours, 9 hours, you're tired, you were working all day, you did things. But if I ask you to tell me what exactly did you finish that day, what exactly did you do, it's going to be difficult to say. Well, I worked a little bit on this and I worked a little bit on that, and then this guy wanted my help, and then this thing happened, and then this is happened. It's difficult to say what actually you finished. So I recommend splitting your day into bigger pieces of work, like 1 hour, 2 hours, and try to work on those uninterrupted. And just focus on something and get it done. And it's more difficult because especially today we're all used, we have the attention span of butterflies, and we need to do something different every 30 seconds or we get bored, but you will tend to be more productive. So from a personal point of view, I recommend that. From a personal point of view, I not always, but usually use the Pomodoro technique. So the Pomodoro technique is it's very simple. There's apps for it and things like that. I actually think have one. So I have this app here, which is called Be Focused, and I have 25-minute windows. And when I start one of these windows, I try to focus on one thing without looking at anything else, without looking at my emails, without looking at my messages, without looking at anything else, just focus on one thing. And then when this 25-minute finishes, it's going to make a noise, and I have a 5-minute break. And in that 5-minute break, I just think about what I want to do next, or I relax, and then I start the next 25 minutes. And for 25 minutes at least, I want to do one thing. That's what I do with multitasking. All right. But from a management point of view, multitasking, for example, take a simple example, very simple example. You're the Scrum Master of a Scrum team. The biggest thing you can do to reduce multitasking is establish a WIP limit of 1. So your people you can actually configure this in Jira or whatever. Your people can only work on one user story at the same time. And this is a very long conversation about how this helps and how to get this, and it will get into deep lean things, and it's not the time today, but this is how things happen, because people start working on one thing, they get stuck in something, they put it on hold, they start working on another thing, they get stuck in something, they put it on hold, they start working on another thing, they get stuck in something. Now the first thing gets unstuck, And this is bad. This is bad for a million reasons. The question is, why does this happen? And it happens because the work is not defined correctly, because there's too many interdependencies, because communication is bad, etc., etc., etc. But establishing a WIP limit helps a lot. Okay, let's get back to the questions. The challenge comes from three directions. Previous managers just gave up. Yes, that's what usually happens. And this is how these people come to exist, because they won. They had this battle before with many managers, and they have 100% victory history. Secondly, it is extremely difficult to get another hire with at least half of his person's experience, so letting him go at some point is high-risk situation. Three, he is a man and I'm a woman, like much younger than him, being his manager. Okay. You do not have to find someone who knows everything this person does. That's probably impossible. This person has accumulated a lot of very specific knowledge across 10 years or whatever. You cannot replace him one-on-one with another person. What you can replace him with is with 2-3 people that together can do what he does, maybe even not even as good, but 80% as good. And that's actually an even better solution. So you do not need to look for a one-to-one replacement situation. And three, he is a man and you are a woman and much younger than him. I understand there's also this kind of personal difficulty, and maybe he's a bit of an asshole as well. I don't know the person you're talking about. And he will be that much more likely to dismiss your feedback. So at some point in the conversation, you have to get to actually not trying to convince them anymore. So the first time you address people, you ask them how you can help. But the seventh time, it's not about trying to convince them. We're not arguing anymore. I'm just telling you this needs to happen. At some point, you get to that conversation. One more thing I want to say is, if this person is so important and some system depends on them, before you make something that might lead to their resignation, you should talk to your manager. So you should go to your manager and you should talk to them and you should say, hey, I have this problem with this person. You're probably aware of it. I'm going to try to handle it. I'm going to try to be professional. I'm going to try to fix it. But I'm just letting you know that it might end up badly. So your manager knows you're doing this and they're on board, and maybe they can help you or they give you some feedback or whatever. So if the worst thing happens and they quit, you already have your manager on board. I think that's something you should do in this situation as well. Next question is how we handle a team that is affected by the upper management communication style, which is directive, switching from how we improve the team's communication, how to take care of the second flow. Upper management has there's two answers to this. The good answer is upper management should get better, right? They should improve their communication style. They should be better managers. But how can we do that? We cannot, right? We cannot change them. So how do we deal with them? So whenever you deal with a communication partner that is difficult, that is upper management or anything, but let's take upper management as an example. They're difficult, they're inconsistent, they change their mind, they want one thing today, another thing tomorrow, and you cannot change them, right? They're out of your control. The only thing you can do is create a communication interface from your side that makes it as good as possible. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better. So you do things like, whenever they ask you something, you try to understand, and then you send them a written summary, an email, like, okay, so we talked about this, and you want me to do this. I will start working on this. I think I will have it done in 3 days or whatever. And whenever they change their mind and they come tomorrow and it was something different, without getting confrontational, you tell them things like, okay, so I will look at this, but I will have to stop looking at the other thing and I will have to start looking at this. So basically, to be a bit funny, you have to treat them like kids, even though they're like upper management. And you have to be very, very clear in the communication to them, make everything clear, calm, professional, but very clear. Do it in writing as much as possible, so it's more likely that they understand it. And basically, you have to manage a bad situation and make it less bad. Unfortunately, when upper management is what they are, what can you do? That's the only thing you can do. But this can help. It can help. It can improve the situation. All right, I think that's all for the questions. Thank you, everyone. We had a lively conversation today. Thank you guys too. I hope I gave you good enough answers. And there's only so much I can answer in the general, of course. Like if you have a specific situation, if you go to my website, which is introspecialist.com, you can send me a message there, or on LinkedIn or whatever. This is my website, and there's a contact page somewhere, I don't remember. And if you want to have a conversation about your specific situation in private, you can contact me there. But in general, this is my answers. Thank you. Have a great day, and I'll see you for the next webinar, which I will announce also on LinkedIn. Ciao, everyone.